So we've talked from time to time about how Nintendo has these shareholder meetings where they will have investors come up and just ask them random questions. And sometimes they're not very good. They just don't really give us much information at all. I mean, sometimes they'll ask, hey, can we get passes to jump ahead in the line at Super Nintendo World? It was an actual question at one point. Other times, though, they'll bring up some interesting topics, and really you can kind of see Nintendo maybe go, oh, we're thinking about doing that, or we are doing that. You've just maybe uncovered it a bit early, and they'll sidestep it. But there were some questions here I wanted to go over, as Nintendo did have their annual gathering of the shareholders this week, and we had some of the questions being covered in real time by an account called N Styles, and I picked some of the questions, had them all translated, and I thought we would take a look at them here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and we're going to start today with this video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Keeper. How many devices would you say that you have to log into every single day? And then on top of that, how many passwords do you have to remember across those different devices with multiple accounts? I have so many electronics to keep track of now with everything using an account that at times I'll forget my password and sit there typing away frantically on a keyboard, guessing as many passwords as I can until eventually calling it a day and having the password reset email sent over just so I can log in. However, now removing the stress of remembering all these different passwords is easy using a password manager like Keeper. It works across all of your different platforms and devices with support for passkeys as well, and you can easily share logins with family and friends with Keeper's hyper secure sharing capabilities, and you can generate strong, unique passwords for every account, amping up your security. Of course, if there's one thing you absolutely want locked down with strong security, that's all of your accounts with your information. So trusting Keeper, which has more than 275,000 five-star reviews, that's a no-brainer. Click the link in the description below and get 50% off a Keeper Unlimited plan or 30% off a business plan. Take control of your passwords and get secure today with Keeper. Thanks again to Keeper for sponsoring today's video. Okay, as I mentioned, a big shout out to N Styles over on Twitter X for compiling all of this. I did have to use like machine translation so that I could move it from Japanese over to English, but I went ahead and just grabbed certain questions, as there were some that were kind of uninteresting. I'd say that like it was about stocks and dividends and things that I think gamers don't really care that much about, unless, hey, if you're a big investor in Nintendo, you might. And if that's the case, I will link down below to N-Style's entire thread where you can go question by question. I think there's like 18 or so questions, so there is a lot to sort of take in there. But I also highlighted some of the questions here with kind of the gray background so we can separate it a bit. And I actually started with question 4, where the investor asked, Apple has announced that it will be equipping the next generation iPhone with AI. I would like to hear about Nintendo's AI efforts, which I am curious about how Nintendo is going to navigate what is quickly approaching, and that being this artificial intelligence age. Not that we haven't had AI in the past. It's just, it seems to be at more and more the forefront now with technology, despite just not really seeing many consumers asking for it. Like, I just don't see a lot of demand for the development that we're seeing right now for AI. Nonetheless, Nvidia is making a lot of money from it, as well as Microsoft and Google and basically all the tech giants, so now they're pushing it ahead. But the answer from Nintendo is, in the gaming industry, technology similar to AI has been used for enemy movements, etc. Generative AI can be creative, but it also has issues with intellectual property rights. While we are flexible in our approach, the most important thing is to create the best possible gaming experience. And, well, Nintendo, they know quite a bit about intellectual property rights, as they, I'm sure, deal with that every single day with their legal team. But in this case, I'm sure Nintendo has played around with generative AI in some regard, and they've also probably noticed that, yeah, it trains itself on stuff that's online currently. And that doesn't necessarily fit Nintendo's strategy or the way that they develop and create stuff, where they are generally just very creative, right? It's a lot of unique ideas, I'm sure, in the background getting thrown at a wall. And I'll tell you now, we probably see like 10% of what actually is going on behind the scenes in terms of development. There's a lot of stuff, I'm sure, just on the cutting room floor. But the fact that generative AI is pulling stuff that already exists technically and puts it in front of you, that could, in their mind, maybe pollute their creative process, but they're certainly gonna keep an eye on it, as I'm sure there could be a point where it just works its way into pretty much everything, whether it's your phone's OS, your PC, how we see Microsoft making the push with Windows. It's gonna be hard to, I think, ignore or avoid it here in the near future. Now, moving on here to question 6. They say, regarding your software lineup, you have a wide selection of software such as Mario and Zelda. Are you planning to create new IP? I like how that I do like how sometimes these investors will just ask very upfront questions that are like, well, I think I could imagine some of the people you see on online on social media who are, like fanatics, we'll say, with Nintendo, run up before they can answer and say, hold on, I got this. Okay, what are you talking about? They've done new IPs. Okay, you see it, I'm talking about on Twitter and stuff. But anyway, they answer, I'll be speaking from the development side, but first I'd like to introduce the current lineup, so please take a look at this video. Apparently a digest video of the titles introduced at the Nintendo Direct. The speakers at the venue are really good, and the sound was amazing. That, by the way, seems to be N-Style's just description of what was going on at that time. Anyway, Shinya Takahashi responded saying, we have released a number of software titles that allow users to experience new ways of playing. We are considering various options for the future. We are considering development for both customers who have enjoyed our previous characters and customers who want to enjoy something new. So, shocking reveal here. Yes, they are working on a new intellectual property of some kind. And Nintendo, typically they'll have at least one that breaks through in some way per generation. At least one. Like, they tried ARMS with the Switch, and it didn't like do terrible. It didn't really light the world on fire, maybe like they were hoping. It wasn't as memorable as previous attempts. And I guess the big one this generation Ringfit Adventure, because that's sold really well. That's like one of the top selling games on the Switch, and it comes with like the Pilates ring. Like, you need that to play it. So the fact that they had like 12 or 13 million, it was a lot of people who bought that with the ring to play it, and it's kind of leaning into that fitness genre. That's pretty impressive. The unfortunate thing is, the character for that isn't very memorable, and that's what they're going for, clearly, because they want to do merchandise, they want to have theme parks. So if they can create another Splatoon, for example, like, that's obviously done very, very well in general for the Switch, but even in like merchandise and like animated shorts and stuff they're doing, like, they're playing around with some ideas there. So if they can come up with something like that for the next system, then that I think will be good to see from Nintendo, to keep trying to push new intellectual properties like they have, again, one per generation. Now, if we go to question 8, says, I would like to ask Mr. Miyamoto what path Nintendo will take from now on. I would also like to hear about overseas theme parks and the relationship with Nvidia. Wow, this investor was asking for everything just about here. Anyway, answer 8, we have this from Shiota Ko, who said, we worked with Nvidia on developing the Switch chip and the system software to run the games. The Switch business is ongoing, so our relationship continues. That was a very straightforward statement. I don't know if they were thinking they would show up and say, yeah, we're cutting ties with Nvidia, even though the hardware for the next system is done, and we're actually working on the software's taking a little longer. That's why we're kind of waiting to next year to launch it. But they're locked in with Nvidia. So at least for this generation coming up, maybe the following one, they could look around a bit more. But something tells me, again, the way Nvidia is progressing right now, especially in the low-powered chip sector and AI, they might be re-upping that deal. But the only issue is Nvidia is probably going to ask for more money, I assume, at that time. We also have Shigeru Miyamoto here, of course, following up, saying, it's a grand story. Where should I start? We're building a Nintendo museum, Uji. I think we've completed a milestone. Nintendo started with Karuta, then we got into various businesses and decided to focus on entertainment. Then we encountered the game business. There is a limit to delivering game consoles to people all over the world. So for about 10 years, we've been working on delivering Nintendo IP to people who don't have game consoles through mobile and theme parks. There will be a Donkey Kong area at the Universal Studios Japan. We are also developing theme parks in Florida and Singapore. We are also working on video. I tell my employees that we need to create a reason for people to choose Nintendo. We don't make necessities, so we need to create a new added value. That's how Nintendo will become a necessary brand for families. This says that there was applause from the audience at that point. I do feel like Miyamoto, while he is at a shareholders meeting, he does kind of feel out of place in the sense that he would be more of a creative mind and I guess kind of an entertainer, a showman here, really. The fact that there was applause from the audience is, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of respect for Miyamoto, obviously, within that room. It's just, it's interesting to kind of picture that. But he's not incorrect about any of the stuff he says here. They don't create things that are necessary. Like, you don't need a Switch or any of these games or anything. So the idea of having new added value to pull people to spend their extra money, really, on your brand. Again, it could be something where you take the family to the Super Nintendo world, or you go out to the movies, or you buy some microtransactions in one of their mobile games. It is interesting the way that Miyamoto is kind of viewing this, though, by the way, because he is talking more in line of outside of just their game console. And that's kind of the way the industry has been shifting, is less and less reliance on a single game console to drive everything. Sure, Nintendo finds it very, very important, obviously, but they also are looking outside of that. And I mean, it's been working really well for them so far. So I think they're going to have some other ideas to continue pushing that envelope. Question 11. Okay, so this is a good one because they say regarding the lengthy development period for game software, I understand that the expressiveness of games has improved and it is taking time, but Mario Wonder was the first 2D Mario game in 11 years. It is important to release software for elementary and junior high school students. I appreciate the once in 10-year measures, but I would like to see software releases continue consistently. And again, this is a good point to bring up because game development is just taking longer and longer. And guess what? Nintendo's also feeling it. Think about how long Tears of the Kingdom took to come out from when they announced it to its release. It was years. And that used many assets and the map. Sure, there again, Underworld, I know, Sky area and stuff, but it used the same map and stuff from Breath of the Wild. Still took a long time. But you can see the answer 11 here. Currently, game development times are getting longer and more complicated. We are expanding and investing in development resources. Takahashi says, long development times are inevitable due to the development of game consoles. The development environment has also improved, so I think we are making efforts to shorten the time. We also want to create games that are fun in a short period of time. So Nintendo does this a lot where they do have their big generational releases like the Zeldas, the big 3D Marios, that sort of thing. But they have a lot of smaller games too, and I do think they mix them well. The only thing that continues to throw people off about all of this is their pricing doesn't necessarily reflect how they are kind of talking about the categories for these games. Because you'd expect something that would be, as they say, shorter term titles would probably be cheaper than the longer term titles. And the thing about that is going into next generation, they're probably going to leverage that $70 price point for the long-term titles, the generational ones, as they already have with Tears of the Kingdom, and that would probably open them up to having $60 quote-unquote short-term titles make more sense, which basically I'm telling you they're going to be raising the price of their bigger games, and that way that they would keep these $60 games and they would feel cheaper and like they would fit into that short-term category. Tezuka did also respond here saying, when I talk about Super Mario Wonder, even I was surprised that it took 11 years from the previous game. In the meantime, we also released Mario Maker and 3D Mario. We have provided several Mario-related gameplay experiences. We are developing games while thinking about how we can make people fall in love with Nintendo. We are also considering short-term titles. So yeah, they're going to keep making games that are smaller in nature, and I think they're going to continue relationships like what they have with Forever Entertainment, as we found out they are doing Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. I think they're going to keep reaching out to studios that we would expect less and less to work on some sort of partnership for remasters. I do think remasters, remakes will continue to play a vital role for them going into next generation. And the only thing I'm little concerned about with that or hesitant on is if they decide that Switch titles now, or even launch titles in a few years, like halfway through this generation coming up, could then start to be moved up for remasters or remakes because they would be going into 4K, ray tracing, that sort of thing. And then it's like, okay, well, hold on. Now we're using those to plug the holes of development cycles with a 4K console now. And then it's like, oh, that would be, I think, unfortunate. We haven't seen that yet. It hasn't gotten there. But based on them moving games from the Wii U to the Switch, with really the reasoning being you can't put the Wii U disc in the Switch, so there was no backwards compatibility as possible. We expect backwards compatibility for this next system. So I'm curious how they're going to handle that. A few more here. Question 13 regarding protection of Nintendo's IP. Nintendo has attractive IP such as Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. Other companies are releasing products that infringe on the rights of these IPs. I would like to hear your thoughts on this. And it's funny because N Styles had the exact same thought as I did, where wondering if this is aimed towards Power World. I kind of feel like it is, because they threw Pokemon in there, although I'm sure they're looking around at games that look similar to Zelda, similar to Mario, and clearly they're breaching rights around intellectual properties and stuff, so it's fortunately not as clear-cut most times. The fact that Power World still around, well, that should tell you all you need to know there, but They did answer, we take appropriate action against those who infringe our intellectual property. The attachment to the characters was enhanced through the game. It is not just about imitating the characters, but the experience within the game that is important. Well, it's still enough to have people look at something like Power World and go, this is just Pokemon with guns. And now you have guns with Pokemon. I mean, look, the fact that Nintendo has referenced Power World in the past, they technically responded to it and said they were looking into it, and nothing's happened. In fact, apparently the studio behind Power World said that Nintendo never even reached out to them. So I think they're aware of that, and that's why they're answering. It's not just the characters. There's more to it. There's an entire game and feel behind that and backstory to the characters, because it's not, again, always as clear-cut as, well, okay, it looks kind of like our Pokemon, kind of like these characters. We'll start sending DMCAs immediately. Question 14 was another one for Miyamoto, saying, creators are getting older. I want him to continue making games, but I also want him to take care of his health. I would like to know if he will continue to be the central figure in making games. They say, I think the generational change is going smoothly. We have young, talented developers. This from Miyamoto saying, thank you for your concern. As expected, I am feeling a bit anxious now that I am the oldest here. I am working comfortably at the company. It's not that I'm not watching the game development at all, but I have the younger generation make it without me having to do any actual work. And the handover has been going smoothly, but the people I took over from are getting older, so I would like to hand it over to someone even younger. I am actively involved in Pikmin Bloom, so I look forward to working with you. So there you go. Miyamoto, while he is also doing a lot of work outside of games with the different movies, because he keeps popping up in those directs, he seems to really be getting a kick out of doing stuff just outside of games, as I mentioned previously. Like, I think the fact that he sees these intellectual properties that he created so long ago kind of get to this point where it is going mainstream, going global, and becoming more of an entertainment property as opposed to just being something that's tied to their video game system. That's a big deal, you know, and for him, he's probably really happy to see that, and the fact that he gets to kind of hang out and basically play Pikmin Bloom in the background, I'm sure, while they're all doing a lot. I mean, he says here he have to do any actual work. He's still doing work, but you get to, he's over 70 now. Yeah, you're going to take it a bit easier. Sure. And I feel like most of the younger generation is probably just really happy to have him around to be able to tap any knowledge or wisdom from him as they're developing these games. And as he works to, again, kind of back off a little more and a little more and a little more, eventually, I assume he'd probably ride off into the sunset and completely retire. But seems pretty happy with what he's doing now, and I guess that's the most important part. The last question here regarding expanding the number of people who have access to Nintendo IP. Previously, soundtrack CDs were distributed at Club Nintendo. I think it may have become a new window for people to experience games. Are you considering a subscription music distribution service for soundtracks or distributing them yourself as a way to utilize game assets? Answer, we are aware that people are attached to game music, and we hold concerts, etc. We believe that music is also necessary for expanding IP, so we would like to use it in a way that makes people happy. I almost wonder if this investor kind of stumbled upon an idea that Nintendo has right now. And yeah, they have such a large library of video game music. I mean, think about decades of music that they have created for their games. And also, as they mentioned, these concerts and orchestra, all these different things. Yeah, actually, it wouldn't shock me if they came up with their own subscription service for music. Now, they have been going on a bit of a rampage, DMCA striking and pulling down music all over the place, especially on places like YouTube. So that also kind of makes me wonder if they have that plan. I do think there's an avenue there for them. Like, I do believe some people out there would subscribe to I guess like a Spotify-like service that has a bunch of video game music there. And if they even took that and maybe divided it up by game, so you could pick like Super Mario Brothers 3, World 6 or something, and you can just go in and, oh, here's all the tracks for the world, and then you can just sit there and play it while you're driving around in your car, or I guess just hanging out in your living room or something. I think there is an avenue there for them, one for revenue, but also, sure, just connecting with fans that way, and especially if you can continue just updating and adding more music constantly as you go along. But those are some of the questions I picked out here with their investors meeting. Some interesting stuff thrown in there. And yeah, Nintendo, they're going to try to keep things fairly vague because they're not necessarily looking to make any major announcements here. But I thought there were some fun questions, and you would see like Miyamoto and stuff kind of talk at these events. That does show you at least a bit more personality from behind the scenes with what's really just a faceless corporation most times. But let me know what you guys thought about this down below. Again, I will link the full investors Q&A that N Styles had posted up over on Twitter X, and you can look through it for yourself. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.